Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. You're joining us today for this webinar, Unlocking Effective Leadership Strategies Using the Situational Leadership Model. So just to introduce myself, my name is Lynn Hunter, and I am one of the training producers here at Informa Connect Academy. And we are absolutely delighted to be partnering with the Centre of Leadership Studies. As I said, this is a new partnership that we've started, and we're very proud and excited about this new partnership that we've actually launched together. So the Centre of Leadership Studies is actually the global home of the Situational Leadership Model, which is the most successful and widely adopted leadership model that is available. This model is really grounded in research and application, and this award-winning solution really enables leaders to engage in effective performance conversations that build trust within an organization and within teams. And it really does help to increase productivity and drive behavioral change. So what I would like to do is I'd just like to introduce you to the two facilitators that we have today who are going to take you through this model. First of all, we have Chris McLean, who is the Vice President of Training and Global Master Trainer at the Centre of Leadership Studies. We're very proud to be having Chris joining us, who's actually based in the USA. So thank you for joining us today, Chris. And we also have Darren Carrington, who is a certified expert and trainer with the Centre of Leadership Studies, and he's actually the course director at Informa Connect Academy. So I will pass you over to them. They're going to take you through this webinar today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to type those questions into the chat. And at the end of the session today, we'll take that opportunity to go through those questions that we have and get some answers for you. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I shall pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a wonderful introduction. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Now, I've been in the UAE building and developing leaders for more than 16 years now. Now, the toolkit that has made my journey and the leaders that I'm working with to develop a smoother transition into a comfortable leadership and successful leadership has been having the situational leadership toolkit in my back pocket. So to have the opportunity of speaking with you about it here today with Chris McLean is just an absolute awesome opportunity. So thank you for joining us. Chris, I guess you and we've been so familiar with the model for such a long time now. Yeah. We could spend hours and hours and be so enthusiastic about talking about all of the benefits and what situational leadership can do for a leader and their team to be successful. But I think we still have plenty in the tank to go on for hours. But for the benefit of our attendees today, it would be really good to get a deeper understanding of some of those real life challenges that I've had shared with me quite recently. But before we get to those, it would be great to have an understanding of what situational leadership looks like as a model.
Yeah, that's great, Darren. Thank you for that. Lynn, thank you for the great introduction. And Darren, what an honor to be partnering with you and talking about this. I was certified in this model in 2003, so I've been a practitioner for 21 years. And I tell you, I've been leading people for 37 years. I've had direct reports, which means I'm really old. But it also, I would say, has been the best tool I've used. And it's really because it allows us to have a pragmatic framework to adjust our leadership style and meet someone where they are. And so excited to talk about it. And Darren, you've probably talked about the toughest challenge we'll have is to take an 8-hour class or all the content and just try and do a high-level overview in a short period of time. And just quick background for those of you who may or may not know the model. And I actually was hired by Dr. Paul Hersey in 2007. So I joined the Center for Leadership Studies 17 years ago, and Dr. Hersey was the guy who hired me. And he and Ken Blanchard did the initial work, and then Doc really grounded us in this model. And I remember talking to him saying, Dr. Hersey, I want to know the history. I'd love to know the background. Like, where did this come from? Because it is grounded in behavioral science. And he had so much to say about that. But he said, you know, Chris, traditionally, it was well received and believed that leadership was a genetic trait. Like you were either born a leader or you were not. And we lived in that world for a long period of time. He said, but then there came a place where we had to understand and learn, how do you train leaders? Because if I can say it, the quote unquote born leaders were already in position. And he said, we just had such a lack. And so we had to learn how to train it. And he said, in this research, this was so interesting to me, Darren, in this research, the hypothesis was that we would identify the leadership style and be able to share it with others and teach a style that we see from effective leaders that could be replicated. He said, but as you go into the research that was happening, really what came out of it was not a best leadership style. It really was a framework, which you're looking at on the screen, that created a probability model. And Darren, I love that language. A probability model means we're not dealing with exacts. In behavioral science, we're dealing with people. So it's not like the physical sciences. So he said, but this framework, this probability model allows leaders to assess where someone is and adjust their style. And so what we all know, anyone listening to us right now in this session, we all know there's not a best leadership style. Sometimes I need to be very directive and take a person through a new task. Sometimes they have earned autonomy and I really just need to have oversight, but really hands off in my approach. Sometimes people need encouragement to work through confidence. And so what I've heard it referred to that I really like is a timing mechanism. There's no good or bad style. There's only the right style in the moment. And the brilliance of Dr. Hersey is he took, and I'll just show you, some of this will be familiar to you, but he took the research that was going on and the pioneering research on leadership and then research on motivation. And he said, if we put these into a framework, now we're actually considering the person before we choose the style. And that's the framework of situational leadership. This model says, okay, I have a leadership style. That's what you see here at the top. But I also need to consider what's driving the person. Where are they from performance? What's their motivation level? And when we put all that together, this framework allows us to choose a style that gives us the highest probability match to influence the behavior of another person. So I appreciate what the framework does. I maybe one other point I would make, and then I thought, Darren, if it's okay, I would just build the model and really explain it at a high level for a few minutes, and then we can have discussion around your challenges. Does that work?
That would be perfect, Chris. Yeah, thank you. It'll give me a good refresher on it as well.
Nice. Okay. Well, I appreciate your humility because I know what an expert you are in this. But yes, it always helps us. We're always dialoguing and learning. But what Doc said, and I call him Doc affectionately, he was my mentor. He gave me my master trainer certification. Dr. Paul Hersey did. And he passed away in 2012. So I get to carry the torch moving forward and keep his legacy alive and the legacy of this great model. And you probably know this, people who are listening, but this is the most widely used leadership model, and it's in 70% of Fortune 500 companies. It has a complexity to it that I've spent 2 days with psychometricians going into the nuances. So Darren, as you guys offered, I know you're offering it over 2 days, which I think is so helpful. And then 2 more days of situational conversations. But in your 2 days, you'll really be able to dive into the nuances and the depth of the model. But what I also appreciate about it is I've been able to explain it in about 6 or 7 minutes. And it makes sense to people, which is what I'll do on this webinar. So Dr. Hersey called it organized common sense. And what I've learned is as we go through this model, you'll see yourself in it. You'll say, okay, I'm already doing that. That's why that works. Or, oh, here's something maybe I could adjust. And so I appreciate the simplicity of the framework. And then one last point I'll make, and then we'll begin to build it. Dr. Hersey was very adamant that this is not a theory, it's a model. And I think that's important as we're talking about it today. And Darren, as you and your team build it out for participants who attend your workshops, because a model can be applied. Theories are great. They're helpful to assimilate and process and to think about things and put them into organization processes. But what a model can do is it can be applied. And what I appreciate about this framework is I can immediately apply it and use it with people that I'm working with. If you're a note taker, I'd encourage you to draw this template out, maybe leave a little room at the bottom, and I'll show you what that's about. But maybe, Darren, I'll just erase all the words and we'll build it from the ground up with this framework. Does that work for you, sir?
Absolutely, Chris. I think that's the best way. Thank you.
Well, and as you put this 4-box quadrant together, the first thing we do is we plot 2 behaviors. And you see them here, one on the x-axis and one on the y-axis. So on the x-axis, we have task behavior, and on the y-axis, we have relationship behavior. Let me just stay here for a moment, because it's important that if those are the 2 behaviors that make up the 4 leadership styles, it's important that we have definitions here. You'll also see in red, we've given you an alternate word. And I'll be honest with you, those words are a little more user-friendly. And so one thing you'll hear, and as you spend time with Darren in the classroom, you'll definitely recognize, we're not really hung up on words as long as you understand the behavior. So task behavior or directive behavior is simply the leader providing structure, providing guidance, giving some direction. You're telling someone what to do, when to do it, where to do it, how to do it. Task behavior is providing guidance and structure. And so I like the word directive behavior as an alternate. And then if you look at relationship behavior or supportive behavior, the definition there is a little bit different than maybe what you would think, because relationship behavior, it doesn't imply that we have a relationship. Now, Darren, hopefully we know that we have relationships with the people we're leading. They trust us. We've built some relational equity. But this definition is more about two-way communication. If I'm using relationship behavior, I'm asking you questions about the task we're working on. I'm providing you praise and support. It's really dialogue. It's not implying that you and I both enjoy cricket and we play in the same league. So it's just one reminder, relationship or supportive behavior is I'm encouraging you or I'm having dialogue with you. Now, if you take those 2 behaviors and you plot them on this 4-box grid, then let me start in the bottom right-hand corner. Now that's S stands for style, because what I'm developing here are the 4 leadership styles. And I would ask you, where do you see yourself in this? I think that's a great question as we're going through this, because I bet as I build this, you'll say, oh, I see the one I use the most. Oh, I don't use that one as much, or I probably use a combination of them. So think about yourself when you're leading or influencing others as we build this out. But if I just plot the 2 behaviors, task and relationship behavior, then you would see in style 1, there's a high degree of directive behavior. I'm providing high amounts of structure and guidance for a task. And then low relationship doesn't mean we don't have a relationship, as I said earlier, but there's not as much two-way communication. So here's a phrase. We use a phrase for each of these, just a simple catchphrase to help you remember it. Style 1 is I talk, I decide. Now, when I say I talk, I decide, it's not autocratic. It's not a dictatorship. It's just I'm doing most of the guidance. Darren, I think about my time in the UK, and I didn't drive while I was there, but I was thinking of if I had the task of driving, you guys drive on a different side of the road than I do. and it's not an automatic, it's a standard. I noticed they were shifting gears. I could imagine, Darren, if you were helping me drive in the UK, what I would need style 1. I would need to know where to turn and which side to be on, and I'm not good with the clutch. So style 1 is not a dictatorship. It's just the guidance I need in the moment. And so I talk, I decide. I just need to emphasize the absence of harshness. I think about my grandchild. I have a 5-year-old grandchild, and I'm teaching him how to swim. We're using a lot of style 1. There's no yelling. There's no dictatorship. It's just guidance. Now, style 2, if we just stay on this path, we're still, if you notice, on this right side. So there's still high degrees of task and directive behavior, but now there is more two-way communication. Look at the phrase now. It's still I decide as the leader, but there is more dialogue as implied by this high relationship behavior. So we talk, I decide means I'm still making decisions, but there's more dialogue, there's more movement happening here in the conversation. When I move to the left side of the model, style 3, It's high relationship behavior. Again, a lot of conversation happening. I'm asking good questions. I'm listening. I'm encouraging. And there's less direction needed in style 3. Look at the phrase. We talk, you decide. Notice the implication here. Notice the implication. I see the note about the task behavior not showing up well. I'm seeing it okay on my side. I don't know if there's an adjustment. Darren, there was a reference that the task behavior slide shows up properly. Are you not seeing it properly on your screen?
I'm seeing everything clearly, Chris.
Okay.
Amara, can I just ask, in terms of your view, can you just maybe click on that icon at the top right hand of your screen, please, and the window to see if you can just change the actual view that might alleviate this problem for you?
Yeah, thanks. I see other people saying it's clear. So yeah, thanks for the guidance there. Yeah, let us know, Amara, if we can help with that. One thing I wanted to point out, I'll just continue, and Darren, if there's any help, you can help her through the chat. That'll be great. What I wanted to say about style 3 is there's an intentional handoff. If you notice who's the decision maker on this side, you decide is saying, we're still talking and I'm the leader and you're the follower or the person doing the work, but I'm now letting you decide. And then style 4, when you think about that one, we've plotted low task and low relationship behavior. And I'll just pause here and say, it does not say no task or no relationship behavior. There's never an absence of those two behaviors. It's all about extent and frequency, but not much is needed in style 4. And so the phrase here is, you decide and I trust you. I think it's important that I pause here and just mention something that's critical to this model. And that is, this is not how I lead a person overall. This is how I lead a person for a task. So if you are taking notes, maybe somewhere on that document that you're writing on, write those 3 words, for a task. Because that's not what I think is important here is I could see a high performer like Darren, the top trainer for Informa and the director of all services. And I could just see Darren as a guy that I would always use S4 with. And then we'd hire someone else and I'd say, well, this new person always needs S1. And that's not the way this model works. What I've learned is for every task, Darren would need a different style, and so do I. So keep in mind, and I say that for style 4, this is you decide I trust you, not as a person. Hopefully I do, but the implication here is I trust you to take the lead on this task. So that represents the 4 leadership styles, but that's only half of the equation, because to understand which style gives me the highest probability of success, I definitely need to go to the bottom here, and I need to decide what is the person's performance readiness. Now, readiness is how ready are they to perform the task? What's their performance? And so, and I just put this continuum up and I think about performance this way. If they're on the right-hand side, their performance for the task is low. If they're in the middle, those two are moderate. There's moderate to low, moderate to high, and then there's high. We call this readiness levels. R1 is readiness level 1, which means my performance is low for the task. R2 is readiness level 2. I'm moderate to low. R3 is moderate to high. And R4, my performance is high. Now, one other thing I'll show you here, I put this red line down the middle, and on the right side of the model, it says leader directed. What you notice is if I'm on the right side of the model, then the leader, I am the one making the decision. So it's leader directed is I decide. But if I'm leading from the left side of the model, it's led by the person I'm influencing, the follower, or it's self-directed. So I appreciate separating the model into a right side and a left side. Now, I put all that together and put it back into our framework, and this is where we'll land. But I like you seeing how we build it, but then this helps me see it more in a format that I can apply. So let's take a look at the left side for a moment. You'll notice the R's are across the bottom, the styles are across the top. And so the goal is for there to be a match. So if you think about process here, then my goal is to understand what is the person's readiness level for a task and which style should I use? And the arrows implicate that R1 matches with S1, R2 matches with S2, and so forth. That's how the probability framework does work. And then to make the point that this is about the task and not the person, I thought I'd share an example with you. So as the vice president of training and global master trainer, I oversee a global team of trainers. So you can imagine people like Darren. I don't oversee Darren, we're partners, but the trainers that I oversee, high level education, a lot of experience in this field. And so I was thinking about one of my trainers recently. We'll just say his name is Todd because it is, and I hope you never meet Todd. But let's just use Todd as an example. One thing I like about Todd is he's gifted in the classroom. In front of a group of people, he makes the content come alive, and he asks very good questions. So for the task of asking good facilitated questions, Todd is R4. And for that task, I would use S4. Like I would just delegate. He doesn't need a lot from me there. But now when it comes to at the end of a session, Todd needs to do expense reports. He needs to document everything, scan his receipts, and send them into our accounting team within 24 hours. And he is just not great at that task. And I see more than often than not, I have to follow up and give direction and tell him what I need. So as good as he is, if you look at it, as good as he is for being in the classroom and asking good questions, he's R4 for that task. He's actually R1 for doing expense reports. And so I want to make the point that even my top trainer is still all 4 readiness levels. Now, we have launched several new products lately within the last 12 months, situational conversations, which I'd be honored to talk about maybe a few minutes at the end, Darren. And then situational change leadership is in pilot form now. But what I appreciate about that is Todd is excited to train those, but he's never trained them before. So he's not R1, he's actually R2. And Darren, I know you'll talk a lot more about this in the classroom, but when someone's R2 for a task, not as a person, that means they haven't done it yet, but they're eager to try. They're keen to take it on. So R2 for the task, that's where he is for training our new product. You know what he needs from me? Selling. There's other words there we'll use like coaching, mentoring, like we're just providing structure and having dialogue. We talk, I decide is what would work for him teaching a new class. And then what's interesting is sometimes we ask Todd to go to a different country and work with executives. He's really good at that, but I'll tell you, he gets a little bit nervous. He asks extra questions and do I understand their culture? And those are things that he's not quite as comfortable with. I would say he's probably R3 for going to a different country and training to executives. So he would need from me as his leader some participating, high degrees of support. We talk, you decide. So as you look at that, the point I hope I made there, Darren, and then I'll quit talking and we'll begin some dialogue. But the point I hope is made here is Todd is a great contributor to our team, and he still has all 4 readiness levels depending on the task that we're using for Todd, that we're leading with Todd. And then I'll add one more nugget here that I learned from Dr. Hersey. If you are taking notes, I think you'll find this helpful. There's absolutely a purpose for every style. And so the purpose for style 1 is to create movement. Kurt Lewin in his change model says when leading change, we need to unfreeze behavior. So style 1 is create movement. The purpose of style 2 is really to gain buy-in. Like I want them to understand why. That's why Doc chose the word selling, because we're explaining the why in the context. The purpose for style 3 is to ensure alignment. Let's make sure you and I are aligned because I'm shifting the decision maker. We talk, you decide. So now I'm shifting that. And then the purpose for style 4 is mastery or autonomy. And so I think that's helpful to know as you're using it. The simple way that you'll see Darren teach it and the way we look at it is over here on the right. It's what's the process for using the model? Well, you start with the task and then you assess readiness, which is here. Then you match style, which is here. So this is the 4 steps of application that Darren would really unpack in the classroom, but at least wanted you to know that as we use it, this is the 4-step process in which we apply it. And it's the same way we teach it. And if I may, Darren, I saw one note in here about, is there such thing as we talk, we decide? I love that question. There is a little bit of a little bit of a bridge that happens here, but there is also an intentional shift. And so I think what I'm trying to do is when there are 2 for the task, and I can't really unpack all this now, but they're not really performing to the standard just yet. And so they need we talk, but I make the decision. But when they move over to readiness level 3, which you see here, now they're starting to perform. And so that's where as we talk, you decide, there's an intentional handoff. The we talk, we decide could be a little bit of a bridge, but we're intentional to hand it off. So I did notice that question, so I thought I'd address it. But Darren, I'll turn it back to you as you guide us through a little bit of conversation here.
Thank you for that, Chris. And yeah, I've made a note of some of the questions as they've come in. So we'll sort of put those on under the spotlight towards the back end of our webinar. But please keep those coming in because they're absolutely fantastic.
Very helpful.
So Chris, you've gone through the model and it makes perfect sense. And there's some, again, the last message, great example to get through the model. Thank you. But I still might be a little bit challenged in where I see myself and the relevance of where I should be coming from to address certain issues I'm facing from members of my team. So I would like to reflect on some of those real life leader challenges that have been shared with me recently, certainly over the last couple of months. And I would like to present those to you. And if you could sort of then align those to where they would fit as a leader style to approach those readiness levels in the model. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that sounds great, Darren. I like the real life because we said it's applicable. So let's challenge that with real life scenarios. That's a great approach.
I didn't want to just throw something at you out of the blue and just, that curveball thinking, wipe you off your feet. But I'm going to assume the role as one of my leaders that I've worked with lately. I've got somebody called Ali on my team who's very experienced in terms of being a member of my team. And he's a real whiz when it comes to putting presentations together. So I'm very keen to develop him because I feel that's my responsibility within my role as his leader. And in light of his natural, or what appears to be a natural talent regarding presentation design, I've given him the opportunity to gain more recognition, not just from me, but from wider areas of leadership, so other leaders and other influential people within the organization. So I've tasked him with putting together the forecast plan for September. Now, it's the 5th of September already. He was assigned this task over a month ago and didn't show any progress. So despite me going in and sort of following up and checking in, almost every other day, we're good, everything is under control. In reality, it wasn't. I ended up having to do it myself. And because I was having to do it myself, I was actually late in submitting this as well. So there's a bit of an issue. And as a result, I'm now questioning, I don't want to say reliability, but I've got a question mark over, is there a limitation as to what Ali can actually do? And should I be thinking differently? So by the application of this situational leadership model, where would that be? How could situational leadership help me as a model to get through this particular challenge?
Yeah, what a great question, Darren. And I also appreciate that you started the conversation with Ali seems to be really a high performer in a lot of areas and does great work. So it does make the point that overall, this is a person I'd want to have on my team. But for the task of getting this work done, this presentation you discussed, and turning it in by the deadline, he's not performing to the standard. And so in that sense, that would put him on the right side of the model. Now, R1 says he's not performing and he really is either uncomfortable with it or not motivated to do it. And if he's R2, he's not doing the task, but he really wants to. And so I wonder, would you say he's more on the R1 side for that task or the R2 side for that task?
But he seems to be avoiding doing
it.
Whenever I approached you, he was, I'm quite receptive. But when it came to actually taking action, certainly avoidance there.
It sounds more like R1. So I think that telling is the right thing. And telling isn't, as I said earlier, it is not harsh, but it's here's the structure. Here's when I need it. Here's when I'm checking it. And then there's some close accountability and supervision that happens there. It almost sounds like, Darren, you asked him what to do, what you needed done. You let him know what you needed done, rather. And then maybe you were just more on the left side of the model, but he actually, for this task, probably needs you more on the leader-driven, leader-directed side and probably more telling. So I think that would be My recommendation was, it sounds like he's R1, even if it's just for a little bit. And the purpose of style 1 is create movement. We need this work done by this date.
There wasn't a lot of movement, Chris. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So that gives a little bit more clarity. I'd like to go a bit deeper on the whole telling and the guiding, because coming from the Middle East, we have so many different nationalities and cultures and languages converging in the same region. So I think the terminology allows us to go a little bit deeper and to maybe get more comfortable with what we are seeing here, because guiding, telling, directing, depending on where I come from in the world, that may have a barrier for me to actually take that approach.
I appreciate that. I've trained this now in 30 plus countries, Darren, and it works well. But I'll point out in step 3, it says match and communicate leader responses. Leader response, and words mean different things to different people. So one of the things, and you know this well, we offer multiple word choices. So if I don't like the word telling, I might be better with guiding or informing or instructing. And so I appreciate you bringing that out, because there's different parts of the world where words don't work the same. They don't have the same implications. If it's a strong hierarchical organization, or if it's more of a matrix organization. So I appreciate the comment, and I'll refer back to something I said earlier. We don't get stuck on the words as long as you know the behavior. And so if telling's not the best word for you, because I didn't say this, but Darren, I lead a lot of people where I don't have authority. I lead my peers on cross-functional teams. They're not keen to me telling, but guiding or informing works well. So I like your comment there. The bottom line is you're giving high degrees of task or directive behavior and not as much dialogue to get to what you needed out of Allie. But the word choice can be different, and different parts of the world like different words. So that's a great call out.
No, great. Thank you for that clarity, Chris. Much appreciated. Okay, so again, in my sort of leadership role play, and I've got somebody on my team, again, her name's Archana. She's fairly new to the team, but she's extremely eager to go about new tasks and taking on responsibility for new tasks. One of which happens to be the organizing of a one-day off-site event. Now, this event is quite prestigious because it's to celebrate the team's success and performance over delivering on a particular project ahead of time to a high standard. And because it's such a high-profile event, the client will actually be there with their team as well. So whilst Archer is so keen to organize this, because I haven't worked with her very long, she's not been a member of my team very long, I don't really know her success or track record around these particular tasks. So if I give it to her and she runs with it and it doesn't happen, there's a big sort of question mark over our credibility. We've created that in delivering the project, but this is also the celebration. And if it goes wrong, then that could have a dent on our future projects that we will be awarded by the same clients.
Yeah, great job, first of all, from you, Darren, because one of the key challenges I see from leaders is at times we confuse enthusiasm for ability or skill. So I appreciate that she has eagerness to put this project on and to have this celebration event, but I think you'd be keen to stay close to her and provide guidance. I think you've just perfectly described readiness level 2, because readiness level 2, we say the person's not performing yet, not to the standard, but they're motivated. They're eager to take it on. And so at readiness level 2, she needs that style too. And the word there is selling, because we're trying to gain buy-in, but we could also use the word coaching or explaining or persuading. There's other word choices, but the behavior would be, we talk, I decide. So you would be taking her through what you expect, but you would be giving her structure and guidance as well. And there's one other mistake that I see often in this model that I'll at least mention, Darren, is at times we don't differentiate capable versus able. And so it's potential versus performance. Here's a better way to say it. Can she put together this celebration event? Or is she putting together this celebration event? Those are two different things. I believe she can, so I'm assigning her the task, but I don't lead her on potential. I lead her on performance. And she's not currently performing this task because it's new, so I would be more structured and directive. Here's the problem. Sometimes we give credit for capability, so we underlead. But what I hear you saying is, I appreciate your enthusiasm. We'll leverage that. And I'm still going to provide structure. So I think it's a great scenario of readiness level 2 and using style 2. We talk, but I decide.
That's interesting, Chris, because going back to Ali, I believe he was able to do this based on what he had demonstrated for his other presentations that he had designed. An ability, is he able to do it? That means, is he consistently delivering on this particular task? No, he's not. So Archana here, Archana is so keen. I don't have to do any selling. She came to me and wants to take this project on. And that answers Hassan's question that's just come in on the chat. Why was that girl selected for this job? What if she is the only choice? Well,
good question.
I've got other people on my team, Hassan, that maybe aren't showing quite so much enthusiasm and excitement about taking on this particular task. And I know that Archana is new to the team, so she wants to create a high level of impression, I guess.
And that's a good point. And the question right above it is really good. Ali may start off at R1 for that task that you described earlier, but then quickly move. And so we have to flex with that movement either way. So I appreciated that comment in the chat as well. Like, I think our diagnostic tool here gives us an entry point for the conversation, but I like the comment of staying flexible and moving with the person. Yeah, really good stuff.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I want to go deeper now because I've got somebody on my team called Ronald. He's been with us for about 7 years or just over now. And I want to show him just how much he brings value and how he is valued among the organization. And I'm about to assign him a high profile project. And I know, again, he has the ability to run with this from the start through to completion. However, he's got some confidence issues. When it comes to decision making, he's not quite the one that's stepping up and making decisions with confidence. He will always come to me and look for that sort of support mechanism whereby he comes to me, and it's almost going back to, I talk, we decide, but he comes, we talk, but I decide. That's what he's looking for.
Yeah, that's a good one. The distinction I'll make in this framework, Darren, is what he needs and what he wants may be two different things. A lot of times, because you just described R3 perfectly, one of the way we would describe R3 would be able but insecure. And insecure, not as a person, but with this task, maybe a little bit intimidated, so checking in a lot. And what I appreciate about the word participating is the ownership is still on the person you mentioned. And so you said Robert, is that correct?
Ronald,
I'm sorry. So Ronald he's performing the task, but he's a little bit nervous or questioning himself about it. So he keeps checking in. And the mistake I see here, Darren, and it doesn't sound like you've leaned into this at all, but the mistake I see is leaders try and jump in and fix. Because if Ronald comes to you and he's like, I'm a little bit nervous, can you check this? Or what do you think I should do here? It'd be really easy for you to come back to the right side of the model and give him structure and direction. But really what he needs is to solve the problem and make the decisions on his own. And so I think if you stay at participating and keep it as we talk, but Ronald, you decide, you're helping him work through that confidence issue. And I think that's an important thing. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chris. That's really relevant as well for our region, because there's also the microscope that's on us. As a leader, we are responsible for delivering. And if anything goes wrong, that comes back on us. So if I am putting into the point of somebody I'm entrusting with running on a particular project, and I'm leaning into them to allow them to make the decisions, and it goes wrong, it comes back on me. And that has an impact on my security within my own role. So that might be something that may be a bit of a void to try to step over.
It's really a good point, because it fosters an unhealthy dependency if you continue to provide solutions for him. But there's not an absence of oversight here. Like, I know there's a high risk if this fails, but you didn't disappear in style 3. You're still participating with Ronald, but he's got to be the one making the decision. Otherwise, he'll always be coming to you for more input. And what I've learned to do in this model is not give direction, when through a question, I can get them to come to the answer. And I think that's an important shift on the left side is we talk, but you decide, Ronald, not me, and you keep that decision-making on him. And I think that's a healthy way to work through that insecure problem he's having with this task.
Thank you, Chris. Interesting comment from Tamara in the chat. So would coaching assist this person to overcome this issue? And Bilal also mentions, what about coaching?
Yeah. Yeah, and your definition of coaching may be different than mine. Dr. Hersey actually put coaching in style 2. Most people I talk to see coaching as a style 3 word, so I say put it there. But in traditional coaching, as I know it through a Grow coaching model or as an executive coach, you're usually not giving answers. You're usually asking good questions. And so I think if that's your framework for coaching, that works well in style 3, is asking discovery questions, but resisting the urge to give the answer, even if you know the answer. So I think coaching is a great word here.
Thanks for that. Again, the clarity is awesome because there's a bit of a crossover and maybe some sort of mist around where coaching sort of disappears into mentoring. And we know that they're quite distinctly different.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so I'd like you to help me with this final one that I want to present to you, please, Chris. Marwa. She's been on the team for about 5 years, and she's always demonstrated a lot of diligence and her commitment to grow and develop, which has been amazing person to have on the team.
Nice.
Now, she was promoted about 18 months ago. Now, she's getting restless in her current role already. After 18 months, it's putting massive pressure on me to think, okay, what do I do with her next?
Yeah.
Now, she wants more responsibility, and she has aspirations to move into a leadership role over the next 5 years. So, well, here I've identified a couple of things, maybe what I can give to her. And one of them is actually taking on the training and mentoring of new joiners to the department.
Right.
Certainly when it comes to expanding our product knowledge, because we have been very inconsistent over the last couple of years. And that by large is down to me because, you know, I've not had the bandwidth to cover all of these in the detail that I would like. But the lack of detail around product knowledge does have an impact when these people get to try to sell this to our clients. So yeah. I see Marwa as a great person to be able to do that. Now, how might situational leadership support me in this particular area?
Well, and I appreciate that. And I'll just say, if she gets too bored, I'm hiring, and she sounds like someone who'd be a great member of my team, Darren. But anyway, I think you're keen to say, if I don't challenge her, there could be some regression is what we call it, and she could maybe slip back. So I like that you're thinking of keeping her challenged. And I love the idea of using someone who's R4 for a task to coach other people. I think the watch out that I've seen here is coaching or training someone else on a task is different than actually performing the task. And so what I've seen is people on my team who are really, really excellent at performing a task, but they're not as good at coaching it. And so that would be the thing you're doing, is you're saying you're R4 for product knowledge and being able to share this information. Now, what's her readiness to coach or train or mentor someone else? And sometimes she might be R1 or R2 for that task, and she would need additional guidance. So that's the one watch out. I had a gentleman once who was asked, and I was watching the interaction. He was asked to provide direction and train someone else on something he had mastered. And he looked back at his leader and he said, yeah, I really don't like people. So that means he was good at the task, but probably wouldn't be the best choice for coaching. He was R4 for the task. It was debugging programs, but he was probably R1 for coaching the other person on it. So I think that's the piece I would say, is there's two tasks in this conversation, and pay attention to both. It's a really good scenario there.
Thank you, Chris. I've just seen Aisha's message coming in on the chat.
Yeah,
if someone is enthusiastic or eager to take on a new project, or who is new on the team, would you give them a chance to take on the project and supporting the team member, or will you not take that risk since it is a big project?
Oh, no, I would definitely give them the project, but I would be on the right side of the model. So if you think about the right side of the model, that means they're over here, they're excited to take it on, and it is high risk. So where I become challenged is if I give them the task, but I use style 4. If you notice this model, if I split it in half like I did before, the challenge is if they're on the right side to take over a task and I lead on the right side, then I'm mitigating the risk because I'm involved. Where I see the mistake is we give someone a high exposure task or project, but then we just delegate and don't stay close to it. That's when it could really create a problem. So yeah, I don't hesitate from giving even junior people high risk tasks, as long as they're getting the right direction, structure, and oversight from me as the leader. I see no problem with that. The problem is when we just turn it over to them and they're not equipped to deliver And so we're under leading and they don't meet the standard.
Thanks, Chris. So if you were able to sort of condense down some of the benefits of what could be expected by using situational leadership, how would you articulate those, Chris?
Yeah, there's a couple things I would say. I was trying to think through because you asked me about that question as we were getting ready for this. And so I put a little bit up here that I would say I feel like it's important. There's a lot more, but a common language for performance. What I appreciate about this model, and Dr. Hersey said this often, this is not something I do to a person. It's a conversation I have with them. So this gives a common language I'm a follower as well as a leader. I report to my CEO, and there are times I have to say, hey, I'm R2 for that task. Help me get the direction I need. So common language means leader and follower understand the framework and are equipped to have a relevant conversation around it. It certainly empowers accountability so people can own their performance, get what they need. I like that it reduces the time to autonomy. So even the scenarios you talked about with Allie and others who are R1 or R2, our goal is to get them moving to the left side of the model. But this situational leadership allows me to expedite that growth and get them to the place where they have autonomy for that task. And then agility, someone put that in the chat. There's a constant flex that needs to happen. And this model creates that type of agility. So those are maybe the top four. I would say Dr. Hersey said on a regular basis, this model impacts performance and change. And so if you're trying to impact the performance of another person, this is a model that's helpful. And if you're leading people through change, I think those are the two summaries on top of what I have on the slide.
Awesome. I'm just going to refer to there are two more messages that have come in on the chat. Adnan, I'll come to you in a second. Floyd has mentioned, how does this model work in dual or dotted line reporting where there are two different leader expectations and styles being imposed on the same employee, like you would expect in a matrix organization?
Yeah, such a great point. I think one of the things we talk about in this model, and we really spend time talking about it when we get to the task, and we say, let's make sure that there's clarity for the task. And when there's two different leaders, there needs to be dialogue so there's alignment. Sometimes there's just not alignment, and we see this on a regular basis. So to me, before we get into diagnosing readiness and matching styles, we need alignment on the task. And the two leaders who have two different opinions and competing priorities, specifically if there's silos in the organization, it's before we even get into the model, let's be clear and aligned on the task. And I think that's a dialogue that has to happen in step one, but it's one we see quite often, Darren, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Floyd. And I'll come to Adnan's question now, because now that we have a deeper understanding of what the model is and how it can support us, I guess we need to think about how we can equip our leaders to go forward and have effective conversations.
Yeah.
And going to Adnan's point, he said, can an introvert be a leader? Because being social to influence others is a must quality of a leader. So how can we go forward and help leaders in having those conversations, Chris?
That's so good. I appreciate that you said that. And look, one of the things, if you see as step 3, it says match and communicate the leader response. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we have the conversation? And it led us to this program where we build on to situational leadership to say, how do you have the conversation? But can I just adamantly answer the first part of the question? Absolutely. Some of the best leaders I've seen are introverts. So behavior style, if you go through MBTI or if you use DISC or social styles or FIRE-OB or HBDI, it doesn't matter. Those are things that help me be more effective as a leader. So let's just put that out there very clearly. But what I appreciate about this program, and I know as you guys do it, you're spending 2 days on this as well, is once I'm grounded in the model and I really understand the behaviors of situational leadership, then I'm able to address some of these problems. And if you look at this, I just think this is so interesting, the research here, because it says, to your point, a lot of managers just aren't comfortable communicating 69% of the time. And you can see the sightings at the bottom. This is current research, post-COVID, if there is such a thing. And then 91% of employees feel managers lack effective communication skills. You can see the cost with that. So after taking this research and after fielding questions about, yeah, but how do I have the conversation? We have created this program that allows leaders to feel more comfortable in considering the entire person. not just the task. So I like the diagnose says, let me think of this person. Let me think of overall, what are their strengths and weaknesses on strength finders? What's their disc style? What's going on in their personal life? Like diagnose considers the whole person and then equips us as leaders to be flexible in our approach and communicate well. So what I appreciate about this one is it's another one of these ways that we equip leaders to have conversations. And so there's a framework we introduce them to. They assess themselves on the behaviors. They learn this process. There's a place in here, this is one of my favorite, where it helps me stop and identify what's going on with this person, what's important to them, what are their priorities. Let me identify how they might react to the conversation. But this is my favorite one to your question, Darren. How do I verbalize a style? If I'm not comfortable with style one, what would I say? So how would I approach style one? And then there's a framework that says, what's the best way to maneuver through the conversation? So situational conversations equips leaders to do exactly what Dr. Hersey's vision was for this model, to make it a conversation with the person, and it equips leaders to do so. So I'm glad that one came up, because this is a program we're proud of. Because I said a lot earlier, I said a lot of times, and I started it early, this is how I lead a person for a task. But also, people bring their whole self to work. We have to consider other factors as well to be more comfortable with the conversation. So yeah, thanks for bringing that one up. I'm glad you guys are spending 4 days on this, 2 days on situational leadership, and then 2 days on situational conversations, because you're really equipping leaders to do the hard work, right? And people call these soft skills. Darren, I think they're hard skills. I think it's the toughest part of my job is leading people. So well done for your team equipping leaders the way you are.
Well, these soft skills make the harder ones easier to deal with, right?
Oh, good. Well said. Well said.
I always say, though, to anyone, when we're sharing all of the content that we do in so many different areas, once you start to incorporate this and it becomes part of who you are as a human being, you don't just think about turning this on when you come into the workplace and you turn it off when you leave. Mm-hmm. When you start to inject this into your everyday reality, from the time you open your eyes to the time you close your eyes, it also provides a support mechanism for your professional capacity and in your personal life, because there will be times when you need to demonstrate leadership and how to flex your leadership style based on what life situation you are facing.
So good. Dr. Hersey said, when you learn this model, you're a better leader, you're a better parent, you're a better coach, you're a better volunteer. So I like that, because I'll tell you, this has impacted every part of my life. I was able to sit with Dr. Hersey just 11 days before he passed away. And I said, Doc, thank you for this. Thank you for this opportunity. But overall, thanks for making me a better leader. And that's what this model does. It's certainly not isolated only to work. And so I appreciate you saying that. It equips us in all areas of life. Yeah, well said, sir.
That's indeed. I'm going to refer back to a question that Hassan put in the chat earlier on, Chris. And I know that when people go through an assessment, there is normally like a default where people come from in terms of their leadership style. And it really addresses Hassan's question, how to best identify if I'm an S1, S2, S3, or S4. Our human mind wants to keep us in S3, but I know that's not very true. What would you say would be the most common style that you see people responding to in the questionnaires?
Yeah, it's interesting. We do the assessment and then we send it out and let other people do the assessment on us. It's pretty short. It's 12 questions. It's contextual validity around this model. But what we find is our most dominant style is style 3, but I've also found it's role specific and region specific. For instance, I've spent a lot of time in parts of India, and I would say style 1 and style 2 have been more prominent there. And then there's other places where I've seen 3. So I think it's also roles in organization. So I hate to broad brush that answer, because I see some executives who really stay at style 3, but then when they're leading change, they're not as successful. So what we really hope is people can recognize the style is needed. But I appreciate the comment, because we have a default, we have a comfort. And we know the shadow side to a strength causes us to either overlead or underlead. But yeah, that was a longer answer than you needed. I would say style 3 in our database is the most frequently used style, but I see a lot of variation depending on the organization I'm working with.
So essentially what we have to have is a sense of self-awareness to know that if this is my default, this is my space of safety and comfort when I'm in my S3. Now, I might have to have a conversation which is more of an S1 style. That might feel a little bit uncomfortable at the start, but there's, again, going back to what you said regarding the vocabulary to describe that telling, guiding, directing approach, it doesn't have to feel uncomfortable. So this is a barrier that we could be having in our minds that prevents us from stepping out of that S3 and heading towards performance issues that require an approach of S1.
It's so good, Darren, and it helps me to think about extreme examples, like if I were stuck right now on an island and had to fly a helicopter back home. Like, I would want style 1 in that moment, or the first time I learned to drive a car or ride a horse. I think if you think about a time when you hadn't done this task before and it was a little bit daunting, style 1 doesn't feel uncomfortable at that moment. It feels exactly like what I need. So I think it helps me also to be in the follower role and think about when I'm R1 for a task, the example of driving in the UK and using your automobile, S1 is what I would need. So I think sometimes if you reverse the role, then you realize, oh, that's what I would need in each readiness level, and it gives me permission to use it when someone else needs it. But yeah, we do work through people being uncomfortable, and they come in with a default style, usually a primary style. And the goal is when they lead, they feel at least comfortable enough to lean into all 4 styles as needed.
Thanks. And also here, Chris, I've got Hassan saying, where does S4 best fit? Is there an example like Darren shared with those cases? So the last one that I shared about Marwa, that was an S4 approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, Darren, if we asked you to train a class tomorrow that you've trained a lot of times and you're very comfortable with, I would just say, hey, Darren, it starts at 8 o'clock and here's the location. So like any task that someone has perfected, that they're good at and they enjoy, I think that's where S4 works, just giving people autonomy and letting them be in their lane for that task.
And 2 more I just want to get before we wrap up today, please, Chris. From Mohammed, what are the potential limitations of the situational leadership model in addressing the leadership needs of a highly innovative organization?
Yeah, really good question. I think when we talk about task, people default to technical skills. When I say identify a task, people think of spreadsheets or entering data into a CRM or putting together a PowerPoint. I think to broaden that, especially innovation or working with more senior leaders, think about the task as behaviors. So now I'm coaching leaders on how to manage poor performance, or I'm coaching leaders on how to lead through conflict, or how to create an engaging team meeting, or how to lead remotely. So I think you broaden your idea of what the task is, and then you've opened up room for innovation and coaching behaviors, not just hard skills. And that's the conversations I'm having with those more mature organizations and more senior leaders that I found very effective there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. And the final one is from Awit. What do you use to assess your subordinates' performance readiness?
Oh, yeah. And Darren, you can speak to this. You'll spend a lot of time diagnosing readiness is the most important part of this model. Unfortunately, when you look at it, the top part takes up more real estate and it looks like the most important part. But that little subtle continuum across the bottom is where Darren will spend the most time in the classroom helping you diagnose readiness well. We go through we have a decision tree, and I won't show it. I won't do a spoiler alert, but Darren will show you a decision process where you ask 2 questions. And those 2 questions help you decide for that task, is that person R1, 2, 3, or 4? And it's a great diagnostic tool that helps me match my style. Yeah, more to come on that in the classroom, but it's the right question around this model.
Brilliant. And again, I'm so excited to get to that stage. So thank you for all that you've shared in terms of your enthusiasm and curiosity about learning more around situational leadership. Chris, it's been absolutely awesome doing this with you today. So thank you very much for your time. I know you've got a lot going on as well, and you're in a completely different time zone to us. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it, Darren. Thanks for the dialogue. Thank you, for all the people who joined and your interest. Really a great use of our time. Lynn, thanks for setting this up for us.
Thanks so much, Lynn.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. That was really interesting, a great session. So thank you both, gentlemen. There's just been a number of people asking about the recording. So yes, please note that we will share the recording with everybody, so you can review this again. We do have, as Chris and Darren spoke about, we do have some workshops that we are launching on this particular course. We have a boot camp that we're going to be doing, the first one of which will be in December and will be held in Dubai. So I've just popped into the chat information about how you can contact us if you'd like to attend the session that we have in December, which Darren will actually be delivering. And thank you everybody very much for attending. We've had and I hope we got through all the questions, Darren. I saw you were keeping track of them all. So hopefully we got through all those questions and answered everybody's queries. But if not, as I say, there's information in the chat on how you can get hold of Informa to get some more information. But thank you both, gentlemen. A great session. I hope everybody really enjoyed that. Some really great insights and questions in the chat. So thank you very much, everybody. Really great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You as well. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
What if you and your team can be even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more? Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.